Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Building Podcast. Today, we're going to be looking at equality and diversity within construction. As we all know, it's a really important topic. We've got to get more people in the industry, and we've got to get a much better diversity of thought within how we manage and carry out our activities. And I'm really excited because today I've got Katherine Evans, who's the recent winner of the Most Influential Women in Construction Awards, which was held by the CITB and the National Federation of Builders. And Katherine's here to challenge the status quo and tell us how we should be doing things differently to get the best out of a diverse industry. Katherine, good morning to you.
Hello.
Good morning. Now, Katherine, I know you have all sorts of accolades and all sorts of experiences in this industry. So I think this is your opportunity to tell us about your path you've taken to get where you are today, and the sort of things that really excite you and you're up to at the moment.
Yeah, I've worn a lot of different hard hats over the last 16 years, and that it started off completely not in construction at all. It was in offshore. It was oil and gas, and I was a mud logger, so I was a geologist. I went from there to working in the Netherlands, where I was just learning Dutch, and I was volunteering at a botanical garden where there was a scheme running for the reintroduction of ex-offenders into, it was the workplace and social setting, and lots of different volunteers were working there together. I went from there then over to the council to work in the environment section of the council, and I was creating a bike route through the meadows to teach children about the last ice age, because I'd learned enough Dutch then. It was bilingual. I was doing one in English and one in Dutch, and came back and I started working underground in a coal mine in South Wales, and I was the only woman there working underground, and the only woman that had ever worked there underground, and that was the best job I had. That's been my favourite, and it's always been, the level of camaraderie has been what I've been searching for ever since. And I went from that to working in Canada. I worked in an open cast for a year and a half, a couple of different open casts, until the arse fell out of the industry and I came home. And then I started working as a geotechnical engineer in WSP, and it was Parsons Brinckerhoff when I started there. Okay. I did that for 2 years, working over abandoned mines and working on the underground nuclear waste repositories because of my underground experience. Was not for me. I needed to get back into industry. I couldn't have been after spending all that time being out on sites and being quite wild, to work in an office and it was a slightly more client facing. I couldn't bend myself into that shape. So I went and I joined Tarmac, and I was there for 7 years. I started as a senior geologist, and then I went into the geotechnical manager role. So I was the geotechnical manager for the southern region, which is it was mid Wales over to East Anglia and everything underneath, all those quarries. Yeah. And it was a case of making sure that everybody was trained to the level that they needed. Everybody understand what the risks were. Excavations and tips rules were written. We were abiding by them. I did really love what I was doing there, but got to a point where I was like, what's more important to me now is Boulders Brass, because I set Boulders Brass up 2 years ago, and that was becoming my passion. There was the mental health and well-being aspects of my quarry managers is something I was really concerned with, because the amount of pressure and stress that comes with holding an 8.1c position. I was concerned about them. I was also concerned about the way that women were being treated across all heavy industry sectors. So it wasn't just to do with mining. Construction was so similar. Rail, working offshore, I knew it was exactly the same there. And all of the things, they're so intertwined. And I think a lot of people say that, oh, well, now that EDI is the buzzword, we've forgotten about mental health. And I see that they're exactly the same. Because if you're treating people well, then their well-being is also being looked after. So to me, they've always been exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's from there then I left and I set up by myself, kind of in a consultancy sense, more so it's more public speaking is what I do most of.
Full time.
Yeah, training and working on communications. I've realized it's something that's really, really important is how we actually put this message over and getting the language correct, and not in a word police kind of manner. It's more the messaging behind those words. What are we actually saying? What does it mean if we structure a sentence like this and we use these words? How does that go into somebody's brain, and how does that affect the stereotype? Are we actually doing anything to change the stereotype, or are we slipping into stereotypes, or are we reinforcing those stereotypes with the words that we're saying? So yeah, it became really important, and I started working a lot with the PPE brands, giving them feedback, building a relationship with them, because there's so much based around trust and relationships, trust, psychological safety. These are all things that are really, really important to me, and they all make businesses work better. They make people happier. They hold on to people for longer, with their retention and will increase if people are happy where they are, if people are given what they needed and they're allowed to do their jobs without their hands tied behind their back.
Yeah.
It's not difficult to give people what they need, and it's going to cost them a lot less to give the people what they need than to replace them. So I think that we have so many opportunities to do better and be better for all intersections of people. Like, for me, it's not just about women, it's about intersections. And those intersections are where protected characteristics cross-cut on a person's identity. And at each cross-cutting point, the more you have, the more discrimination you're likely to face, the less privilege you have. And me, as a woman who is a white woman, cisgender, heterosexual, I've got kids, I'm healthy, I'm neurotypical. I have got so much privilege. The only privilege I feel that I don't have is I'm not a man. But I don't particularly want to see in how men are treated. I'm quite happy to be a woman. I don't particularly want to be a man. And that's something I stand in front when I'm doing my presentations and training and say, like, I've seen how hard it is to be a man. I'm not here to tell you that you've got it easy, because I understand, I get that part. And it's not a gender war. This is about society changing and us against patriarchal thinking. It's not women against men.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a really positive way of presenting it. I think that, you know, we've all got to do better, and the opportunities for us all to have better mental health and better working conditions is a really, it's a very uplifting message to be able to send out to everybody, and to be able to, you know, show people there's a better path to follow. I think that's a really, really good way of doing it. And actually, coming from the experience you have of working across those deep mines and open cast mines, and then running a large area for tarmac, gives you a huge amount of credibility across a wide spectrum of people across all those industries you've talked about. So I think it's, you know, your Boulders Brass has got a very good standing to move on from. So apart from public speaking, then, Katherine, are you advising companies, or are you advising PPE manufacturers, or what else does the day hold for you in Boulders Brass?
Yeah, both really. So I'd say there's three different limbs there. There's Boulders Brass that works with the PPE industry to make sure that the PPE is functionally fit for purpose. So it's not just protecting against, it's like you've got your protective equipment start, the P and the E, but there's the first P we've forgotten about completely. And the first P has become price. And it's something that we really need to rethink, because we have continental Europe will spend so much more per unit of PPE than we do in the UK. We see it as a commodity. It is a race to the bottom. But when we actually start to look into, why is this so cheap? Why can I spend £4 on a piece of PPE, like a garment? How is that actually being created? We've got companies with really strong ESG messages, and their CSR, they are backing that, yet they're buying £4 pieces of PPE. There is forced labour being used to produce that PPE. And to me, it's really important when we think about the welfare of people. It goes all the way back. So there's so much more to it than just those who are the bums on seats or the people who are working out on site. Like we've got so many more points of like ethical fall down that we aren't thinking of. Yeah. So there's that side of it. Then there's the part where it's the end users and actually speaking to the end users, finding out what the end users really want, finding out what is affecting the end users, and not just in PPE, it's in their safety. It's to do with how, if I look at it from the point of being a woman, but intersectional as well. So it's thinking about neurodivergence and race and disability and like the physical, but there's LGBTQ plus as well. LGBTQ plus, it's not something that is acceptable in the entire world. Right. So if we are sending people around the world, there aren't countries where some people are just illegal for existing. So it's to understand that we haven't all got the same level, baseline safety level. It's really, really important to actually start to think about safety intersectionally and how those who are making the decisions at the top of the structure, they really probably don't have the same level of baseline safety as those who are the workers further down. And that is something when we really need to start talking about bias and privilege. But these are words that have become so, it's like when you say the words toxic masculinity, that'll clear a room. You lose people then. But there are other ways that we can talk about these things without going for those trigger words. And it's a lot about that side of the influence and speaking to those end users, those people affected, and the others. And then there's the bit in between, which is the employers. And it is like the consulting with the employers, auditing with the employers, and looking for things that are silent discriminators that they may not have realized. And that's because of the research that I've done and being able to speak to the end users, knowing what is available out there. And it's kind of being that person in the middle, that piece that is connecting. So if you think of when you've got like your introverts and your extroverts, and your extroverts are kind of like your bees that will bring the pollen in, and then you have your introverts are the ones who like hold on to the pollen down the bottom. They are the ones who are making the deep relationships. So you need the connecting people in a network, and then you need the people to hold it down. And I'm somewhere in between the two of those, I feel like, because I've got a massive network now of people, and I can always find somebody who will be able to fill the gap that you need. But it's a case of actually getting it out, and that's what I'm doing with the PPE. Is like the influencer marketing side of it, of actually showing this stuff is available, so you can buy it, and these are the reasons why you should buy it. These are the positives that will happen if you do buy it, and then I can use that kind of the terminology to all parts of women's safety, like against sexual threats. Hormonal well-being is something that I'm really, really interested in and researching a lot on. Perinatal mental health. And perinatal physical health, because that's something that I've had personal experience of, and it's the same thing. When you've got personal experience of it, you can connect with others who have the same, and you're able to talk at a similar level with and be respectful about it. And all that, because you have all these different intersecting points, it's not just about women. It's like if you're going to talk about perinatal mental health, we all have a mother, and if you have a partner who's the birthing partner, you watch what they go through to be able to speak and understand what is affecting them. So that a big part of what I do is I do these talks, and it's called Rebels, Punks and Pirates. because it's about the society's rejects. It's just something that I feel like we are in the Korean industry, because we're all rogues. We're all rogues who've come together, and we are a tribe of rogues.
Yeah.
And it works really well because we are this very similar people, and we're very accepting. I found there's like a difference between certain sectors in how accepting they are of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And the Korean industry is quite accepting of differences.
Right.
So to stand in front of a group of like 100 to 150, they're usually mostly men, and talk about rebels, punks, and pirates, and they say, well, I was the one who was most likely to be orchestrating the coup. And my mum would just look at me and think, and she told me that you were the worst son I ever had. It's like, thanks, Val. But it's like, because of the other girls they seemed to behave really well, and then there was you, and you just didn't. And it's like, well, all the women who come to work in these industries that are generally mostly men, they're all exactly the same. And we get on so well together because we're such similar women, and our brains may be structured a slightly different way to the stereotype, but it doesn't make us any different. We're just, the stereotypes are stereotypes, aren't they? They're not exactly positive. So I talk about rebels, punks, and pirates, and it gets across a bit better that we're just another type of society's rejects, and these are the things that we're going through. And if you know the things that we're going through, you know you're not bad people. And if you knew this information, then you do things differently, like locking the women's toilets is a classic one. Locking the women's toilets from the outside. So you may not realize, because you may not go around actually trying women's toilet doors on sites. They tend to get locked from the outside to keep the men out. Not because the men are trying to go in there for a look. It's because the men are using the toilets because their toilets are so dirty.
Yeah.
So, they lock the women's toilets.
I absolutely understand exactly where you're coming from, yes.
Yeah, but what the people who are making those decisions don't realise is that women go to the toilet more often than men, because we have a shorter urethra. We also we spend longer in the toilet because we have a lot more clothes to take off. We don't stand up to pee. We also have period management to take part in, and we wash our hands for a lot longer than men do. All these things take longer. Plus you have to then go and find a key as well, which can be a nightmare. I know one woman, she told me that the key was being kept hidden inside the printer. Because that's how strongly they are against allowing men to go into the toilet. And I think if a man needs to use a toilet, I don't really care what their gender is. I don't want somebody to poo their pants on site, because that would suck. That would suck for everybody. So I really don't see it as being that important to lock them, as long as it's left clean. And the men's toilets should be clean as well. We shouldn't be expecting men to go and use a dirty toilet, because my husband tells me all the time that his personal hygiene is a lot higher than mine. I just don't think there's a divide in the genders and how clean your toilet should be. But I talk about how having children, giving birth, carrying a baby around on your completely forgotten the word.
Well, you carry them on your back, so you can have your pouches at the front. That's it.
No, your pelvic floor.
Oh, your pelvic floor, carrying while you're pregnant. No, well, that's different then. No, okay. So I thought post-birth I was, but
No, carrying a baby inside you on your pelvic floor.
Yes. Yeah.
Really, really stretches your pelvic floor out, and it's sometimes impossible to actually get it back to how it was before. And the pelvic floor it holds on to your bladder. It holds on to it's holding your gut up. It's holding your rectum up. And I think it's something crazy, like 43% of women who've had a baby will experience some form of incontinence after that, on both sides. And for men, it's 5 to 6% of men as well. And 5 to 6% of a workforce that is mostly men, that's a lot of percent.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Yep.
Yeah. and you think that perhaps you don't have that many women, but 43% is still a lot of those women who have had babies, and 83% of women will have a baby by their 40th birthday. So there's a lot of women who need to be able to access a toilet often and not locked. When you have to go and ask for the key, it creates that parent-child relationship. And women are already facing a lot of microaggressions, and those microaggressions increase in number depending on their intersectionality. So to have to go and ask for permission to go to the toilet, usually from a man, because it's men who hold the management roles, it's incredibly demeaning, and it really does put you further down the list. Then you're there longer. Somebody will crack a joke about, oh, I'm timing you, oh, you need to go again. You're like, yeah, because my bladder is absolutely shot after carrying that baby around. They're more likely to have UTIs, menopause symptoms. You don't know when your period is coming. They could have had a flooding incident. They could have leaked. Like, leaking happens all the time, and now you can't hold back a menstrual flow, so you've got blood on your clothing, and it really does show up on orange PPE or yellow PPE. That's a nice color to have, and it's really difficult to get blood out of anything if you don't wash things straight away. There's also the risk then inside of toxic shock syndrome sepsis increases, because per inch of floor in a public toilet there are 2 million bacterium. So we're walking in, and during COVID, so much better because there's just hand wash everywhere. You wash your hands outside, you walk in, and there shouldn't really be much. And a lot of the time you go into a women's toilet, you probably don't know this either, it's the store cupboard. It's used as the store cupboard. For the cleaning products. It's the dirtiest room in the house, and we keep the cleaning products in there. We then take those germs, and this is like E. coli, the MRSA, like the serious nasties that will cause people to be off work for quite some time, potentially end up in hospital, depending on what their immunity is like. We spread those everywhere around, and then we put them back in there. So women are trying to move things out of the way. They're getting all of this onto their hands. If they have their period, they are then using their hands to replace their period products. So they are pushing bacteria inside themselves, because there's a lot of the time you'll go to these sites, they don't even have soap. Hot water, there should be hot water according to the regs. There isn't. We're putting people at risk, and I don't like to say that women need to have a cleaner space than men. But when it comes to that kind of situation where you're actually having to change products, and these products, period products like a tampon, if you're not using the right thickness, like the width, the size of it, if you're using one that's too absorbent for your flow, you push it against your skin very dry, it actually slits the skin, and it allows that bacteria to enter the bloodstream. And with toxic shock syndrome, there are 40 deaths a year from toxic shock syndrome. I think those are the ones that are associated with tampon use, because the bacteria really likes to grow in that space. It's a perfect space for bacteria to grow. And when those nasty producing bacteria end up in the bloodstream and they start to produce toxins, that is what can kill a woman, kill a person, kill anybody, because it's not just women who get toxic shock syndrome. If you were to use a cup, I think that is reduced to 3 cases a year to use a menstrual cup instead of a tampon, but it's still something that happens. You can get toxic shock from a period pad, just being there and entering your skin somehow. So the state of the toilets is something that I am very, very passionate about. And sorting toilets out for all genders. And that's even away from the stuff that I do with PPE. That's just personal safety, the menstrual equity, and the hygiene of generally of people, and how we can keep them in work for longer. PPE then, like diabetic foot care. there's another big thing. So we have aging populations in quarrying anyway.
Yeah.
More people with diabetes, and they are taking time off work because they are in so much pain. There is chance of infection increasing because of the way that their feet are sweatier if they're wearing waterproof boots. People who are diabetic shouldn't wear waterproof boots.
All right, gosh, didn't know that.
Yeah, because it keeps the sweat inside. It also keeps the water out, but they're sweating inside. So you've got more chance of blisters.
Yep.
You've got a static breaker that's on the insole of all safety boots.
Yeah.
That can actually rub the bottom of the foot and cause lacerations. So you need to have boots that have got an inbuilt, it's like it's within the insole, is intrinsic. So you've got less seams available inside the boot to actually rub. The tongue is softer. It comes to the right position in the legs because you may have swelling. Their feet are likely to expand because everything's kind of loosening up. All of these things can cause blisters, lacerations, sepsis, like infections into sepsis, would cause them to have limbs amputated. So we're going away from they've got to take some time off work because they're in so much pain to
losing them as employees.
Yeah. All because of a pair of boots.
Yeah.
And there are boots available
that work.
Rockfall have designed some specifically for diabetes safety boots. Skechers make safety boots. V12 makes safety boots, all for diabetes. So it is available, and it's not just about women.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, I'm staggered. I mean, we're doing a little bit of work in India at the moment, and diabetes is enormously prevalent over there. So 1 in 3 in the city we're working in is diabetic or pre-diabetic. I mean, it's a massive problem.
Yeah.
And you see, we're one of the most obese countries in Europe. You can see we're going to have similar problems here in the UK. But Katherine, I mean, what you're really talking about is really spreading and educating managers to getting them, increasing their levels of trust so that they're treating people, putting a higher value on their staff to be able to get a higher value back out again.
Yeah.
And that level of trust that you talk about is really crucial to get that back in. So apart from your campaigning, how do we go about educating the industry? How do we go about educating? Is it a one-to-one? Is it one-to-many? Is it what are you finding the best way of getting into companies to get this to explain the value of improving people's conditions?
I'm currently working with the Institute Quarrying, and I'm going to a lot of their safety days. So I'm presenting at their CPD safety days. So you get to see an array of people from across the quarrying industry. And I'm guessing these things must exist as well in the construction industry. There's that our crosscut from quarrying, you think, well, quarrying, surface mining, construction, these are two different things. But the place where they come together is we dig the aggregate and you use the aggregate.
Absolutely.
And in the middle, we kind of meet and we do roads. So we take the aggregate and we make the roads. So that's how it's so similar. We make the cement, you use the cement. We make the bricks, you use the bricks. So these places, they cross so much, and especially the geologists, the geotechnical engineers. This is where it goes into civils then. Having all these people in one place and just starting the conversation. And I think for if people like me who really, really are thirsty for information, and you just drop something on my lap and like, well, that's interesting, and I'll go down a rabbit hole and I'll become like your next expert on it because I'm that way inclined. For them, I think these meetings coming together as a big group, conferences like that, it's a conversation starter. It could be all that's needed, as long as you have those people in the room. And that's why it's important to bring diversity to that room as well. Because those who have got lived experience, those who have a partner who's going through it, a daughter, a son, they are the next level of influencer for there. They will then go out and talk about that a bit more. So it's trying to get stuff across in a way that's engaging. And women walk a really, really tight rope, and you have to be very careful with the language that you use to make sure that people feel they're not getting told off, that there's no gender war being created. And you really do, you run this gauntlet of being like somewhere between pick me and sailing your sisters out to sea, or being so heavy feminist that it turns people away. So it's like trying to, and I've learned where and how to do that from training people in tarmac and training dozer operators and excavator operators about geotechnical safety when I can't run their vehicles. So it's like
it's challenging.
It's challenging, it's uncomfortable, but you have to learn how to actually talk to each other to do that.
Well, we'll perhaps come back to communication, but I mean, I think we're a results-based industry where we generally have to, we have projects to deal with, and we need the resources and the people to do that. And I think, obviously, in my experience, you can explain why to people generally in a language they understand, then generally you've got a reasonable chance of success, haven't you?
Yeah, it's all about the why. It's all about the why. Simon Sinek is all about the why, and it's true.
But actually, that communication, you've got to get over this unconscious bias, because I suspect most people you're talking to haven't got a clue where you're even starting from. They just don't understand why and why that communication is so important.
Yeah.
So real challenge.
It is really challenging, and it's to break that first bit at the beginning. I think the way that I do it is I do it with humor.
Yeah.
My language is absolutely disgraceful. I think I've been working for too long in this industry, and it's just become grammar. And generally, talk to people as one. Talk to people regardless of what their level is in a company. I talk to them like I would talk to my mother. So with the same level of respect. Yeah, and it doesn't matter. And it's the relationship building. It's actually being able to find something that we concentrate so much on what makes us different. We forget we're all human.
Yeah, we're all the same.
And we have things that connect us, like hobbies, interests, our kids, our experiences. Like, we're all connected in different ways, and to focus on those things rather than what drives us apart or makes us different is really important.
Well, some wise words there. So just coming back then a bit to diversity within the industry. We all have views about why it's important. In your view, why is the diversity so important that we need to improve diversity across the whole industry? What are the key benefits or the key wins for the industry?
Rebellion. Now, if you've ever read Rebel Ideas, a book called Rebel Ideas, it is an absolutely fantastic book about why it is so important to have diversity of thought and what diversity of thought brings. Those lenses of previous experience, like you said, they ground you and give you a platform to speak from, and they enable you to build those relationships with others like yourself. But to have those ideas all together in one place, plus the psychological safety to be able to speak to each other without fearing being cut down, removing groupthink, the way that groupthink. Not many people even know what groupthink is.
Well, yes, I'm different subject, but I look at the industry as and particularly at director levels, and I just see homogenous boards of the same type of people, and then wonder why we're struggling to change as fast as we need to change, because we have that groupthink, and it's. If I take with my director's hat on, I sit there saying, well, you're very good at HR, you're very good at production, you're very good at finance, and you become a director, and suddenly you're meant to know everything about everything, and you're all the same. And you don't, we haven't got that diversity of thought to lead these businesses through what is going to be and what is currently a really challenging period.
Because your brains all work in the same way. You've had similar experiences, similar backgrounds. You've probably, if you're anything like the quarrying industry, if there's a conveyor of people. You just go around the merry-go-round and you see the same people you worked with 20 years ago, and now you're back together. But we all end up thinking the same. And when you have that groupthink environment, then it's so difficult to speak out against it because it's career limiting. And you become the nuisance and the person who is challenging, because we don't accept challenge particularly well. And also, it's the same thing again about communications. If you don't do it in the right way, it's received in a very different way to what you intended it to be received as. But that diversity of having all these people together, all putting in their 2 pennies worth, then you'll come out with something totally different. But it's realizing, I think, that even though your group is doing really well, you've still got that threat of groupthink. Because they could be like a very diverse group, but if there is bullying going on in that group, if there's toxicity, that will stop and then will stifle, and you'll end up just doing what the leader says, because you might have an over opinionated leader who doesn't allow the others to speak first and will always go first. And I think there's so much more to it than just having the diverse people in the room. It's about having a listen up culture, not just a speak up culture. What happened to the last person who spoke up?
But that's all about having competent or trained. You almost need to be trained to be in that position, don't you? I mean, you need to be made aware of how your behaviours will influence the output of that particular team, and that's exactly what you've been talking about right the way through. You need to be aware. You need to be far more aware of your situation and the situation of your team.
Yeah, the self-awareness side of it, the PPD, we focus so much on CPD and being technically excellent. And I think we don't put enough thought into, well, how is this person going to lead? What makes them a strong leader? What's the difference between management and leadership? And like leadership and management, 2 very different things.
Well, there's another podcast, that is.
But thought leadership and management, and the way we use the word leadership and management interchangeably, and
we do.
So different.
Yeah.
And that, I can't remember that. What? I've gone off on a tangent and I've lost my train of thought.
You've lost your train of thought. Well, I'll give you one back. I mean, I picking your point up there about the ability to lead, or even the ability to manage. I think we've got rid of grandfather rights on all the hard skills in the sector. We still very happily have grandfather rights to being a board director or a senior manager. It is just grandfather rights, and that training that you might be expected to get to improve and to get that continuous improvement in how you go about is often forgotten about or ignored. And that's for me, that's a real challenge that the industry has to grapple with, particularly with the amount of change that we've got coming through the industry. Katherine, we've done really well on time so far. There's so many more questions I'd love to ask you. I mean, well, I'm going to ask one before asking to wrap up. But we've talked about sort of the management in the industry. What would be your aspiration for those coming into the industry? How would you like them to be trained or educated to come into this just the most amazing industry that we have?
I think we miss a trick when we bring people in. We forget how much we've learned as people and how we've learned how to talk to each other. So I feel with the generation who are coming in, and it's difficult to just say everybody, because I don't think the generations, I don't really believe that each generation is exactly the same or different in some way. But you have people who have come through a very difficult time of COVID. Their way of communicating has become completely different to how we learned how to communicate. And I think they're still in that situation where they are with their buddies, their friends, and that's really, really important to them. What I've learned from doing this for so long is that my buddies, my friends, the people who I will call if I feel like I need to talk to somebody, they're ex-colleagues. This is how I've met the best people in my life. They have been colleagues, and they're not so much the friends outside of work, because we get each other. The camaraderie, I think it just comes back to my coal mining camaraderie. I think we expect a lot from the younger generations, the apprentices, the grads, the green labour when they come in. we expect them to know how to deal like an adult does, when actually in men they don't finish going through adolescence till around 25.
As early as that.
So they're coming in, they're still going through puberty, and they're unable to and it's the same with women are coming through in a different way. You don't see the world through the eyes of like your fully grown adult yet. And we think that they can just go in and they can speak to each other in a way that we deem professional, but how would they know what that is? Because nobody teaches you how to be professional, and we deem appropriate, but who deems appropriate? Who decides what that is? And I think we should be teaching them how to network and what is acceptable in work. Show them what is expected of management for them, and this is the kind of thing this is what makes us this business, and these are the things that you can do, these are the things that you really shouldn't be doing. Don't wait for those people to make the mistake till they found out they've done something wrong, because that can really, really hamper confidence, and you might lose those people at the beginning when that's talent you could have kept if they knew what the boundaries were. Putting boundaries in place, there's another one. Teaching people how to do these, we call them like the soft skills, but these are core skills. These are things that if you can't do, how can you ever progress? So I think coaching from a far earlier point, we like to give people coaching when we see that they are future leaders. We should be doing it from as soon as they enter the business.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very lucky. I'm a governor of a construction college, and there are some awesome people coming through. You know, the new recruits have got some really great ideas and some great challenges. But I absolutely take your point that they need to be instructed sort of too hard, but they need to be made aware of where those boundaries are, and also where the opportunities are, because I believe they are bringing an enormous amount of hope with them into the industry that we need to capitalize on, but we do need to give them those boundaries to work within.
Yeah.
Really exciting. Katherine, go on. I'm going to ask you your last question. With this podcast goes out to the construction industry per se. So not it goes to there's all sorts of people who may listen in, but the National Federation of Builders is mostly main contractors, large and small, right the way from smaller contractors right the way through to the multi-million ones. What would be your sort of your three key aspirations, your three key hopes, using your I suspect coming from Boulders Brass, you've got your three tenets there, but you tell me what you'd like. What would your three key messages be out there?
Work with the end user. That's one. Speak to the end user. Yep. Don't think that what you know is right. Benevolence stops people from progressing. Kindness.
Yeah.
Treat people more kindly and crack down on those who don't, because we've become, and there's the big divide about how you should go about enforcing. I feel that there is not enough enforcement. There's enough enforcement on certain groups of people, but others get away with a lot. And it's those others who are stopping the progress and the change that we desperately need.
That's an interesting perspective, yes.
Yeah. And lastly, I guess, networking, communications, relationship building. This is just fundamental to collaboration, innovation, problem solving. Focus more on that. And just because somebody's not technically excellent doesn't mean they're not your future leader. You don't have to be technically excellent, because once you become that director, like you said, you don't get to do the technical stuff anymore. And that might be your bread and butter, and that might be what gives you joy. So those others who are fantastic people, who are good at pulling strings, good at keeping the team together, the team glue or the team ribbons, then see their worth as well. Because your introverts, we don't all have to be extroverts. We can be introverts as well.
Yeah.
And that's how we bring the diversity forward, is actually being able to collaborate and communicate with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating. I was hoping you were going to come up with communication as your third one. It's you know, with a different hat on at Constructing Excellence, we have had to create a diploma in collaboration, because the clients at Construction Excellence are saying, you talk about it as an industry, but you simply don't know what it actually means to collaborate.
Yeah.
So we've
Yeah,
now
that's excellent. That's
we've
amazing.
now had a diploma in it. Very popular. Katherine, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today, and we may have to do another podcast to pick up the bit of the bits we've missed out. But I've really enjoyed a canter through some of the aspirations and the role of Builders Brass. There's clearly a large amount of work you've got to do within the industry, but I think with people like you helping to drive it and being promoted through things like the Women in Construction Awards, and let's hope we don't need them in 10 years' time, but great accolade to pick that up this year. But many thanks for today, and wish you every success going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.